And good morning, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode is officially live. And guess what, folks? We are at the final weekend before NFL kickoff 2023. What an exciting moment. I appreciate anyone who is watching with me today, who has been along for the offseason journey, followed every topic we have covered, and been someone who has supported the show. You mean the world to me. But this will be the last offseason episode before we kick things up for the regular season. And joining me today is someone who has the Bengals on the brain. His name is Joe Goodberry, and we will be talking about the AFC and outlook on how the conference will look in 2023 in advance of the start of the regular season. So grab a morning cup of coffee, maybe some Saturday morning flapjacks, pancakes, whatever you call them, and buckle up because we are having a great show today. Let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. I am happy to say that I have accepted my invitation to join the ACC. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's truly an honor. I'm really, really excited to show you all what I have. But as I mentioned before, joining me today is a man with Bengals on the brain. His name is Joe Goodberry. Joe, how you doing today?
Doing great, man. We've got some awesome couple days of weather here in Western New York where it feels like fall, feels like football weather until we get to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's going to be back to the heat wave. But doing great. Football season's around the corner, ready to go.
Yes, sir. We're both very excited to watch our teams. It's what they call false fall. It's where you get that cool weather and then you get snuck up on by like 95-degree days, that like Labor Day heat. It's the worst, but you know what? I'll enjoy it. It gets me in the spirit, and I'm really, really pumped to talk about the AFC with you. But before we do, I have to address something. I have a window over there, and I've been looking out of it, and I've been seeing something weird in the sky, Joe. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No. It's Aaron Quinn and Greg Thompson, and they are here to tell you about the Cover One Premium Pass. Hit it, boys.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, please. If you are interested in becoming a Cover One Insider, you could check the description below. We have the link in there. It is $60 for the year. You get access to some incredible stuff, including our premium Slack channel, which has Bills discussion pretty much 24/7, as well as some other interesting features. And you get a really cool t-shirt. And who doesn't love t-shirts? I mean, I love t-shirts. Joe, I assume you love t-shirts too. But anyways, let's kick off our episode today and talk about the AFC. And Joe, when I had you on here last time, I recall that we had a pretty interesting discussion with kind of what seemed to be an embryonic outlook of the AFC this year, because a lot of moves were still yet to be made. I had a very bold take about the Ravens that kind of went full 180 as they made some serious acquisitions in the offseason, including the draft. So I just want to first ask you, or really just gauge and pick your brain on this. What is your outlook on the AFC as a whole this season? How do you think it's going to pan out for teams that were once contenders? Do you think it's going to be more difficult? Do you think it's not going to be as difficult? What are your thoughts?
No, it's definitely going to be more difficult. It's somehow, right? The AFC keeps adding quarterbacks, keeps adding talent. I don't know if we've ever seen a conference this lopsided in terms of quarterback talent. Not not just guys that were drafted. Clearly, when Russell Wilson last year comes over, we're like, oh no, here goes another one. Deshaun Watson stays in the AFC. And then this year it's Aaron Rodgers. And you just go, man, if these guys are even semi still good, it's just another quarterback, another challenge, another team you got to get over the hump to get in. You can list the top 10 quarterbacks in the AFC, and you're talking about 10 good quarterbacks, and that means 3 of them are not going to make the playoffs. Only 7 teams can make it. And then you got to think of this year 2 leap potential guys. We saw it with Joe Burrow 2 years ago, Trevor Lawrence last year. Kenny Pickett being the first rounder. Can he make that jump? I know the Steelers probably feel he can, and maybe has showed glimpses of that in the preseason. If he does, that just brings the Steelers right back into the fold. And I was so happy to not see them be in position to compete in the AFC North, but they did look really good in the preseason. So we'll see. So again, strong, stupid strong, unfairly strong for our teams to finally have that guy and that quarterback and that team. And, for so long waiting for the Bills and Bengals to get to this point. And now we're here with a bunch of other teams.
Yes, that has been a common complaint of Bills fans as well is, oh my God, we're finally great, but everyone else got great too. Yet when Tom Brady was in this division, it seemed like no one could ever figure it out. And yet here we are, and now it's an absolute bloodbath. I fully agree. The AFC has become exponentially more difficult, at least on paper. But even last season, it was really a bloodbath. And what is equal parts impressive and disappointing is like what you alluded to. The fact that there are going to be talented teams that have to miss the playoffs. Like you can just look at the AFC East and the AFC North alone, and there's bound to be a team in that division that just doesn't make it, right? And that's really insane because you could be a team with a winning record this year. You could go 9-8, you could go 10-7, and that might not be enough, which is really wild to me. And when you talked about the quarterbacks, like you even have to look at some of the quarterbacks that are in their year 3. So like Mac Jones, who might actually take a step with Bill O'Brien, but then also the rookies. Anthony Richardson goes to the Colts. CJ Stroud goes to the Texans. If he's anything of any promise, Will Levis goes to the Titans. Like there is talent all across the board. And it seems like a majority of the teams' baselines are still going to be tough. And, a team that even if it's in your division, those games are not going to be gimmies. And looking at the Bills and Bengals schedules, I'll ask you this question, but just talk to me about your team's schedule. And I could talk about the Bills after, because you guys, after the update yesterday, are the 21st strength of schedule this year. So what's your outlook on that and really kind of measuring the difficulty of the schedule this year?
Yeah, so 21st doesn't sound that imposing, right? Especially when the last couple of years they were, I want to say 3rd and 6th respectively, and they still made it as far as they did, the Super Bowl and then the AFC Championship game. I usually don't use strength of schedule when I'm looking and projecting the season. I try to look at quarterback versus quarterback matchup. If your quarterback plays better than the other team, you're probably got a great chance to win that game. In fact, statistically, you do. So, if your guy puts up a 110 rating and the next guy puts up a 95, I can tell you who won that game more than likely. And it's just simple, but it works. So I still think even with the 21st and the Bills being in the, what is it, 26th strength of schedule, both teams that probably means they're going to be in good shape this year. But I think the hardest part of the Bengals schedule is that they start off in Cleveland and then versus the Ravens in week 2. We've got a dog going crazy outside. I don't know if you can hear them, but
beautiful day. The dogs are enjoying it too.
They are enjoying it. But starting off versus Cleveland and then Baltimore is tough because if you're not ready to go, losing Joe Burrow for most of training camp, it could be like last year where they started against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Burrow had his appendectomy in August and then wasn't ready to go week 1, ended up turning the ball over 5 times. It was a struggle that first week. They should have still won that game. They came back. It went in the overtime. They missed the field goal and they ended up losing. But still, that could be the difference between getting the first seed and not. And I think in this AFC, I mean, that's like the crown jewel that's paramount to maybe your success in the playoffs.
Yeah. We're in a similar boat because our opener's against the Jets at MetLife. And it's kind of nice, but it's also not when you have to do a road divisional game in week 1, because at the same time, you're in enemy territory. You get it off your schedule early. It's done. You know that, and especially for you guys who have it in week 18, they're going to come home next, right? And you could salvage if you do end up losing that game. But it's also a divisional game. It's also conference implications. You don't want to look back at your season and think that we came out of the gate sloppy. Here we are at like a really good record, but it could be even better if we had just played a tighter game. And now we're in third seed, fourth seed. Like, we have to play all these games. We have to play wild card teams, which, let's be real, this year, these wild card teams could very well be just as imposing as division winners. It really is such a toss up. But I do want to ask you a little more about Burrow. You know, you cover the Bengals and you have seen with the injury, which I'm very glad, even though they are our rivals, I'm very glad that the injury was not season ending, that we get to compete against him this year. You know, you never wish that on anybody. But what is Joe Burrow's health status? Do you think it's week one? Do you think they shelve him? And how do you think he's going to look? I know you talked about last year, but a serious evaluation of what you expect of him coming out of the gate this year.
Yeah, so I think everything was primed to have a big year. I mean, we're talking about the third youngest 53-man roster in the league, but yet bringing back some of the highest percentage of starters or roster of the 53 with the Bills. I think Bills Bengals had the highest percentage, but they're a young team, so they should be entering their prime now, which is crazy because of how far they've gone the last 2 years. And that could be hopeful expectations, right? You guys have been there. It's kind of hard to gauge where in the window you are. That's pretty much the debate whenever you have that quarterback. You know, are we still in the window? Is it the end of the window? Is the window closing? Where is it? And we thought this would be the first offseason that Joe Burrow was healthy. If you remember when he was a rookie, 2020 was the COVID year, truncated offseason, no preseason, just rolled right out in the week one against the Chargers. Here, go play, Rook, you know. And that went okay for a rookie year. But then he tore his knee, if you remember, really bad. He had to rehab that the following year for his sophomore season. Wasn't ready to go until late into camp, was cleared right as camp was like pretty much ending, with 3 weeks to go before the regular season. So he got his practice time in, and they started off, 50-50 that year, and then got hot again, went to the Super Bowl. Year 3 is the appendectomy. Happens right away, week 1 of training camp. He loses like 25 pounds. It ruptured everything. He had to have surgery. It was a major, they tried to not really report it. Yeah, it was scary. So he wasn't ready to go right away. It took them a few weeks to get rolling again. And you could see his internal clock and timing was off. Everything was just, we don't have the reps. It just wasn't there. The arm wasn't as strong. He wasn't as good breaking tackles and making plays happen in the backfield. So then this year we're like, here we go. The contract should happen anytime. We'll probably talk about that. Hasn't happened yet, but that should probably get cleared up. Everyone should be healthy around him. The offensive line should be the best it's been since he's been there, which hasn't been good. And he should be healthy. He should get a full spring and summer for the first time in his career. And then bang, one week into camp and he sprains his calf. And at the time, people were like, several weeks. Could it be 2, 3, 4 weeks into the season? How long is this going to last? You don't want to mess around with it. And then I'm down there in Cincinnati for the week of the first preseason week. They had a joint practice with the Green Bay Packers, and Joe Burrow comes out. He's got nothing on his leg. He's behind quarterbacks doing mental reps and going through the motions. And I'm like, he looks good. And everyone looking at it like, yeah, the feeling around the stadium with everyone I talked to there is like, they're not worried about it. They're going to give him as long as possible to get ready so that it's no chance of re-injuring or a small chance of re-injuring. Give him as long to rest as you can with having the goal of making him ready for week 1. And then he came out this week ready to go, practicing in a limited fashion. I think next week will be a full way. Give him a full week of practice and then get him ready for week 1.
Yeah, and I had no idea about the appendectomy. I knew he had it. I didn't know the extent of it, so that's scary. I guess, yeah, when it comes to his limited return, I mean, I don't really have any doubts. Like, as long as Burrow's getting his reps, he's a timing kind of quarterback. He's going to go up against the Cleveland defense that, Jim Schwartz is going to send pressure, but we don't know what that defense is going to look like fully with all the new acquisitions. It might be very, soft, prototypical, something that Burrow might be able to pick apart. And that might be what he needs, really, because getting in time, getting your bearings on especially a division rival is super beneficial. But yeah, definitely glad he's okay. I actually want to pull up Charles's comment too. What's up with Mixon? Is there a suspension coming? Is there any word on that?
We don't expect a suspension to come for Joe Mixon. So we had 2 issues. One was the aggravated menacing charge where a woman said that they got into an altercation on the road. She said he came out and said, I should shoot you right now. There's video. They talked to other people. He went to court for this a couple weeks ago. He was found not guilty. There was just not enough evidence or proof that he actually said these things or showed a gun or any of that. She didn't even describe him correctly. And didn't even describe what would be a 6'2", 230-pound running back. So it doesn't sound like anything there will happen. The other one was while he was out of town and the people watching his house, there were kids playing a Nerf gun war in his yard and through the yard. And one of the kids got shot by his, I believe it's his uncle. I don't want to misspeak completely on it, but I think his uncle watches his house while Mixon's gone and shot at the kids and hit a kid in the leg. I believe there is like a insurance type thing going on there, but no criminal offense. So I don't think anything happens with Mixon there.
Gotcha. So really just to expect from the Bengals, I mean, apart from the offseason losses, which we'll talk about later, fairly healthy team that, I don't really expect to have a huge drop off. I mean, if Burrow seems a bit rusty, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing. But if he's getting his practice reps about a week and a half before the season starts, I think you should fare pretty well against Cleveland. But comparing the Bills schedule, I mean, we are in a situation because when you guys have yours, you start with 2 divisional games, then you play LA, which is a rookie team, really, like could be tough, but I don't think you would have trouble. Tennessee, Arizona, Seattle might be tough, and then a bye week. So your first half of your schedule is kind of a high and low kind of thing. And I think the Bills share that with you because we start with the Jets, but then Vegas, Washington, go to Miami, then you have Jacksonville, then you play the Giants. Honestly, it's a long slate before our bye week, but there's winnable matchups and then there's tough games, including the one we play against you. What really I think about our schedules, about the conference as a whole, kind of tying it back into this, is I have a feeling that whoever the first seed is this year is going to be the team that came out of the gates the hottest. Because if, let's just say in a hypothetical sense, Burrow is rusty and they go 0-2 or 0-3, or like, Mahomes is still gelling with some of his new receivers and the loss of Chris Jones looms large and they start 0-2. And then the Bills, and yes, this is probably a biased take because it's a Bills show, Joe, but the Bills start 3-0 or something silly like that. Yeah, no. And it's all, again, it could very well be a different result, but that honestly could be a huge factor into what ends up being the 1 seed this year. Because the 1 seed could be a team that, with how tough this conference is, and depending on some of teams' NFC schedules, could win 11 or 12 games. And then you talk about divisions, you talk about how schedules close out. But again, it's all about streaks. It's all about momentum. And if a team is coming out of the gates hot, ends up going into their bye week like 6-2, 7-1, whatever, that could be the difference because everyone's division has at least one competent team that's going to challenge them. For the Chiefs, it's the Chargers, who I think should have a pretty good year this year. I mean, you could talk about the Broncos and Peyton potentially being tough. For you, it's quite literally everyone in your division, including Cleveland potentially. And for the Bills, it's quite literally everyone in their division. So really, when we talk about the 1 seed and we talk about our schedules, it's nuts to think about the fact that one of these teams could be a 1 seed ending up with 11 or 12 wins. What do you think about that? Like, do you think the 1 seed this year could end up with that record, or do you think there's a team that kind of separates from the pack a bit?
No, I do think, because talent-wise, I think the top 3 teams are pretty much equal between the Bills, Bengals, and Chiefs. Anyone can beat each other. We've actually have pretty much all beaten each other, except for Bills, Bengals haven't played enough to say that yet. It's just been 1 game and in a quarter. But yes, I do think that you touched on it a little bit there. The division could be a big factor in it because even if you go 4-2 in your division, which is good, but that's 2 games that I don't know if the Chiefs lose 2 games in their division, even if they split one with the Chargers. And I could say the same about the Jaguars. I don't know if, look at that division. It's pretty poor. It's pretty downright bad. Yeah. I don't know if the Titans rebound, even if they split with the Titans and run the table on everyone else. I mean, we could be talking about those 2 division winners if they continue where they were last year, going 5-1 in their division. And if the Bills and Bengals go 4-2, which is still good in the strongest divisions in the league, you're still talking about a 1-game difference there that could be the difference in seeding at the end. And then they play each other. Bills play the Bengals. They play the Jaguars too, right?
Yes, in London.
Or is that the Bengals play the Jags, the Bills. Yeah, that's right. So the Bengals play the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Jags as well. So I mean, like, we're talking all 4 of these teams are probably going to have these tiebreakers of head-to-head, and it might just come down to those as well.
Yes, it's really insane to think that there is a realistic outcome where the Jaguars are the 1 seed because they coast in the division. But that Jags team also, and it might be a take that discounts the potential of another year of Trevor Lawrence and the addition of Calvin Ridley. But that Jaguars team, despite having a pretty good showing, I know they lost the game, but they didn't look bad by any means in that Chiefs game. I thought they just got
No.
bested. And that second half of the Charger game, they turned it on. But that's a team that made the playoffs by the skin of their teeth and played down to competition often. So I'm wondering if that team takes the step forward with Peterson and actually kind of evolves and we see them as this true contender, or if it's another example of a team that just gets by, can make the playoffs, but plays down to competition. But even then, like if this team wins 11 games, that might be enough to constitute 2 or 3 or 4. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, sorry, go on, Joe.
I'm probably a little bit more lenient on the Jags because they remind me of the Bengals. You know, the Bengals just squeaked into the playoffs as well the year they got to the Super Bowl. They got hot at the end. They got into the playoffs. They beat every team by 3 points. So, like, you know, that's skin of your teeth as it is. And then year 2, they're a completely year 3 of Burrow. Last year, they're a completely better team now that they have the confidence. They know what they can achieve. They know what they can do. Your quarterback in year 3, you're blossoming on offense. I do think there's a chance for that the Jags and Lawrence look as good as they ever probably will in year 3. They've got enough weapons, I think, at running back and receiver and tight end. So they should be a tough out on offense. And even if they take a small step forward, you're right. That could mean 11 or 12 games winning.
Yeah. And what I think is fascinating about the Jags is, again, we're talking about a team that they really remind me of Buffalo, like in the Josh Allen era. Trevor Lawrence's first year was ugly. He was finding his footing, also had a dismal coaching staff to boot with Urban Meyer. And we lost to them. Great. And then you look at year 2, Lawrence is taking these steps forward. There's throws that you wish he could have back because you know he can hit them. Like that potential's
the Bills
there.
Lost that game. You could refresh my memory on that one, can you? What happened there? That was like a 6-3, right?
Yeah, it was 9-6. I am reliving
9-6.
past trauma, and so is this chat. I apologize, but yes, basically what happened was
because we played them that year also.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest culprits of that game's loss was your new offensive guard, Cody Ford, who unfortunately was getting absolutely dominated. That entire offensive line that game had an brutal display. The Jags were hitting home on so many plays. Josh Allen and his known fumbling problem was still a thing in 2021. And Josh Allen of the defense was just having the game of his life. And I 100% think there was momentum there. Like he wanted to show out. Jags just had their number that day. The offense completely stifled themselves, had no idea. And the worst part was on the final drive, it was 6-9. Nice. And I'm sorry, I had to do it. And Allen actually throws a good pass. And of all the terrible times, and chat, you know it, Joe, I will say this. I'm a Gabe Davis defender. I love Gabe Davis, but he dropped a huge first down that ended up
Gabe Davis tends to do sometimes.
Unfortunately, yes. He did the alligator hands. Like he dropped a pass and then they missed out on what could have, I can't believe I'm saying this, could have tied the game and sent it into overtime, which like you don't want to do, but it happens. So the Jaguars, yeah, that game, thank you for making me relive that trauma, but they're a team that reminds me a lot. Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
I was going to say for the Bills fans that didn't watch, the Bengals Jags was week 4 of that year. And at the time the Bengals were 2-1. No, they're 1-2.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a Thursday night game. So Joe Burrow, this is a game where like people still didn't know the Bengals were going to be good that year. And they were down 21-0 at going into half. And then they came back and won and beat the Jaguars at the gun, Evan McPherson field goal, which was a precursor to how they were going to play these big games for the rest of the year. That's the year they go to the Super Bowl. And that was our first, I was there, and that was our first glimpse of like, man, they might actually be good. They can turn it on a dime. Yeah,
absolutely. And for the history of Bills Jags, by the way, it's chaotic as hell with those matchups. I mean, the playoff game where it was 10-3. And then you had that year after where the Bills played them in the regular season and Leonard Fournette and Shaq Lawson got into a fight. Leonard Fournette got ejected. The Bills ended up winning. I think it was like 27-17 or something. I don't remember the score, but they're so chaotic. So that London game
was a week 1 game that ended at the end, back of the end zone touchdown. Am I thinking of this correctly? In Buffalo, Ernest Wilford catching the touchdown. I'd be completely messing this up. This was like 15 years ago, I think.
Yeah, my memory is so hazy with those matchups because there's honestly their matchups have had some of the most insane moments. Like during the drought, especially like the TO, I think it was 98 yards. Like it's
Yes,
just crazy
right.
things happen when you play the Jaguars, and they're just so entropic as a team, and they're even more entropic now because you have Peterson there, and you just have like they're a defense of like playmakers, but as a unit, they're like beatable, but they'll just get these crazy turnovers or generate like a ton of pressure. I love Kentucky, Josh Allen. Like there's a lot there and they makes them formidable. But the point I was like really finding was they remind me a lot of how Buffalo's developed too, because year 2 Jags, year 2 Trevor Lawrence was a team that seemed to like almost have it like offensively, but there were like miscues and overthrows and holding on the ball and decision making was a problem. But you saw the rise and slow progress of Trevor Lawrence. This is year 3, and I would not be shocked at all if they're even above what we're predicting them to be. And they're a 2020 Bills where their offense is just explosive and beats you in a million different ways and covers the whole span of the field. So I think, wow, devolving into talking about the Jags, but they deserve the credit.
This last 10 minutes and send it to some Jags fans. They'll probably enjoy it.
They will definitely enjoy it. And this is a show about the AFC. Like, we got to give flowers to the teams that are rising. Like, I'm a football fan and a Bills fan. I adore Buffalo. I want to beat everybody, but I appreciate good football, and the Jags could be a fun team to watch. Yeah. But before we go into our next topic, because we're going to talk more about our divisions, for those of you in the chat, please keep contributing. For those of you who joined a little bit late, please throw a like on this video. For those of you who are in the future and listening to this after the fact, please rate the podcast. Show some love to Cover One. Drop a like on the stream that is now on YouTube as a video. It really means the world to us. We appreciate it. Throw us a follow on Twitter. We have some fun content. Joe is one of the most insightful people I get the pleasure of talking to on this show. The man does a lot of hard work for his team. And even if you're not a Bengals fan, it's worth checking it out because he has some great content and really provides some great insight. So now we move on to our division specifically, Joe. And I'll ask you this because we touched on it a little bit earlier, but the conversation I want to have is comparing our two divisions, the difficulty of both, and where we kind of see them falling at the end of the year. So just give me your take on the AFC North versus the AFC East and which you think will end up being the tougher division this year.
Yeah, so I think these are clear the two best divisions in football, and just get that off right off the bat. But the AFC North, we kind of forget the Browns in this a little bit because I think everyone's like, yeah, Bengals number 1, but there hasn't been a three-peat division winner in the AFC North ever since it started in, what was that, 2001, 2002, whatever year that the AFC North was formed. It's always been back and forth between Steelers getting 2, Ravens getting 2, Bengals getting 2, and then it recycles back through again. Browns have never won it actually ever in their history. Yeah, the AFC Central has been won by the Titans, Oilers, and the Jaguars more recently than the Browns have won it. So to poop on the Browns a little bit here, we will for a second because it's a division rival. But they do have a really good roster this year. And I do think their coaching staff is good. They made one of the biggest upgrades going from one of the worst defensive coordinators in the league to Jim Schwartz. If he at least gets them to average, they're going to be fine. They're going to be a really good team and a tough out. It really depends on Deshaun Watson and how good he is. Can he regain form? Can he look like the guy? The Browns remind me of the Jets, if you were to compare the two divisions, because the Jets are hoping, well, we got this quarterback. If he is what he was 2 years ago, MVP form, we're going to be in great shape and they're going to be deep in the playoffs. No one would argue that. If he's that good, if Aaron Rodgers is that good, they're going to be good. The roster is really good. The Browns look at the very same way with the same hopes. And if Watson can look like he did 3 years ago, they're going to be in great shape. And then the Ravens made up a bunch of additions. They finally are changing offensive coordinators from Greg Roman. He just could not conduct a passing offense, to giving him someone that Todd Monken that can do that, hopefully. And if they can throw the ball a little bit more, and I don't mean hopefully from my perspective, I just mean from an NFL perspective there.
We're talking objectively here.
Yeah, objectively. They added a bunch of receivers. They added tight ends over the last couple of years. They should be good. If they surround themselves in a passing offense, maybe they can finally take that step. Because I'm a big Lamar Jackson fan. I always have been. And while Roman did get him to the point of an MVP season and high efficiency, they were never going to beat these top teams in the AFC until they could throw the ball and win being down by 10 or 14. they didn't have it in themselves to do it. And I don't think that is a slight on Lamar Jackson. I always looked at it like, you guys don't have any weapons and you got Greg Roman here. It's not going to happen. And I think Lamar can do this. So I think adding weapons and putting them in a passing offense will give them the best chance to go further than they ever have before. They've been railed by injuries the last 2 years so bad. And those tend to carry like not just a year. Everyone expects, oh, September, this guy's coming back. But then you look at that injury list from last year, and half these guys either aren't on the team anymore, don't look the same anymore, or on the PUP list, or starting the year, injured or are buried on the depth chart. We know, you guys see it with Von Miller. Everyone see Bengals that got to activate. Leal Collins is on the PUP list. Chidobe Awuzie still hasn't been fully practicing yet. So like these things carry over longer than just the offseason. They go into the following year. So the Ravens got to battle that hurdle. And then finally with the Steelers and the AFC North, I think the roster is good and they're young and they hit the reset button and they may have nailed it. And if Pickett's even decent, even if he's quarterback 16, that's much better than what they were the last couple of years, maybe even last 3 years, because Ben wasn't very good that final year as well. They can be, I'm not in on their offensive coordinator, so we'll see if he can take another step with that group. And if they can, then they're going to be tough because that defense is good. And I think they keep making good picks there, whether that's Keanu Benton or Nate Herbig. They just keep nailing it. And I'm like, you keep drafting Steelers guys. Of course you guys do, because you're the Steelers. But yes, I compare them more to the Patriots, where no matter what, I think that defense for New England is going to be good. We got to see how the quarterback goes. We got to see how your passing offense develops. But you're a tough out because I think the offensive line for the Steelers has vastly improved. It's usually good for the Patriots. The defense is going to be good for the Patriots. They have pass rushers. They still have Bill Belichick. They're going to be tough for you, even though the Bills really haven't had too many issues with them lately. But they give other teams issues, and that's what's important. Can you rack up wins against superior teams or inferior teams in that scenario? And then the Dolphins for the AFC East are really probably the strongest roster in a lot of ways. I think they have weapons that match their offensive coordinator and their design. And for them, can you keep Tua upright for 17 games? We haven't seen that in years. I mean, going back to Alabama, we have not seen Tua finish a full season ever. So, like, that's a huge question mark for them. If it happens, they're going to be good. If not, and who would predict health? I mean, if there was an over-under on Tua's games played this year, would it be 12? And would you even take the over? So it's tough for them, and they're in a tough situation because if he's not healthy, they have built this bubble, and it's ready to go as far as he can take them.
I'm really glad you brought up the Dolphins. I'll talk about the AFC North more, but I'll start with East to North. So when we talk about the Dolphins, I actually see a lot of parallels with the Ravens, not in the way they play, but kind of the structure, because on paper, every year, this team should compete. And they have a loaded roster, but the injury bug always seems to find them. And Aaron Quinn always talks about how he doesn't truly believe in injury prone. At least I hope I'm phrasing that right. Aaron, feel free to flame me if I'm wrong. But what I understand is he doesn't believe in injury prone. I don't, to the extent of, I think freak injuries can happen, right? So like we had a conversation about the Bills linebacker Terrell Bernard, and he had an injury history, but those injuries didn't really connect. They were kind of like, oh, he broke his hand, he broke his leg, like things that can just happen on a football field. But when you see a pattern of similar injuries start reoccurring, that's when it's problematic. And for Tua, when he's healthy, mans that offense beautifully because he's a rhythmic passer with speedy receivers that burn coverages. Like, even if you're jamming them at the line of scrimmage, you have to hope that your corner is able to actually do that effectively, or someone can do that effectively. Because if not, they're getting behind you. All Tua has to do is hit them. That's it. It sounds simple. It's not, obviously. Their play calling is very strategic, very complex, but Tua is the guy that can man that offense. Whether you consider him a game manager or a top 5 quarterback, whatever you do, he's the right man for it. But the problem is concussions are not something that you can look at like, oh, he broke his leg last year, patch that up, he'll be back, he's fine. They are an injury that has a likelihood to return or happen again every time you suffer one. Tua suffered 2 in the same year.
That we know of.
Exactly. And that second one completely tanked his play. Like, you saw a different Tua. He was not right. That Packers game on Christmas was not the same Tua. I think he's a perfectly good quarterback, and I've never slandered him. I've done slander as a fan, but not as like objectively looking at him. I don't believe he's going to stay healthy. I don't have a reason to believe he's going to stay healthy. And for that reason, I don't think the Dolphins will play to their full potential because I just don't think they're going to be as good if you have Mike White there. Like, and people love Mike White, but Mike White was probably a great guy. I try really hard not to like tear anyone down here. I just don't have the same level of faith in him as I would having Tua in that offense. And I think that's indicative of the fact that Tua in camp is the full vote of confidence from a training staff that has never questioned it, even with his injury history. So for the Dolphins, if they are healthy, if Tua does manage to stay upright for a whole season, they will be very good and potentially a division winner, as much as I hate to say it. But it's just hard to place faith in them for that reason. The Jets, on paper, look great. Their defense is stellar, young talent, a bunch of guys that are, their cornerbacks are great. Their safety room is top heavy, but good. Like, I think it's very good. Adding Adrian Amos after Chuck Clark got hurt, especially, is still great depth to shore that up. Their defensive line might be the deepest in the NFL, and Quinnen Williams is a top 3 defensive tackle. Like, even if you don't consider their pass rushers, specifically their edge rushers or depth edge rushers, elite by any means, they have an elite D tackle. That changes everything for them.
And they have waves at the edge position. They'll keep they're 4 deep. Where if the first 2 guys aren't effective, the next fresh guys are coming in and can beat you.
And Joe, I was in a space yesterday. I actually was looking up their tendencies yesterday and kind of seeing how they run. They're a 4-man rush team. They don't blitz often, which is beautiful because it's just like, well, not beautiful, but I am speaking objectively again. Like, when you could hammer home with 4-man rushes, like, it just makes things so difficult. That's what the Bills were doing this past year with Von Miller before he got hurt. So again, just a really talented team defensively. Offensively, Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Famer. I have said, I think last season was a bit of an outlier because new receivers, injured hand. He kind of started finding his form at the second half of the year, but honestly, he to me, I don't think he's really lost that MVP form. I know people want to write him off because he's had a bad stat year. He wasn't the same guy, but I think there were a multitude of reasons for that. But where I wonder if they will be successful is how quickly is it going to gel? Because if this was Aaron Rodgers still on the Packers and LaFleur and Hackett comes back and they're running the same system and they have Watson in his second year, he has another year with Dobbs, you add in rookies, but they're not your emphasis. That is when I think their offense runs, like, from the get-go. They start out hot, they go hot. For this year, with Hackett being the sole offensive mind, because Saleh's the defensive coach, he's just going to, check in, but he's got his defense to run. I just wonder what it's going to look like immediately. Like, are they going to come out of the gates hot? Are they going to rely on Rodgers most of the time? Or are they going to really try to lean on Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook as a hybrid with their depth backs as well and try to make it so that Rodgers just has opportunistic second and third and shorts? And if they have this chemistry and they gel as immediately as Jets fans would like them to see, they're tough. Beyond tough. They're a very good team. I am skeptical of how fast it'll work. And they have a brutally tough start of the year, like insanely tough. They play New England, Buffalo, Dallas, and I'm including New England, and I believe Kansas City. I have to find their schedule. But the point I'm making is coming out of the gates for them, like I alluded to before, might not be in their favor. And if they can't overcome that tough start of the schedule and they start out 2-3, 2-4, under 500, what happens?
They crumble.
Exactly. Right. That's my question. And I want anyone who is a fan of the Jets who does happen to see this episode to know that I am not trying to cast aspersions, really trying to look at the team objectively. There is so much talent there. I just don't know how soon it'll kick in. And if it kicks in immediately, they're tough. And I do think they could rival for division winner. And then New England, I don't sleep on New England. I've said it on this show before. I stand on the fact that the Patriots are a tough team. I just don't think they have enough star power. That's really it. I think where they could ascend is if Mac Jones ascends, because Mac Jones has never struck me as a guy who can play well off script, that can make these great deep throws, right? He's a guy who I think plays more in the Kirk Cousins school of just, again, rhythmic passing, like hit your guy that's open, take your check downs, take what's easy. But ultimately, if you task Mac Jones with beating you with his arm or his athleticism, I don't think he can. And in a division that has the Jets and Dolphins and Bills, that could be a death sentence for your hopes for not only the division, but the playoffs as well. But their defense was very good. Very, very good. Top 3 DVOA, I'm pretty sure. And they were second in the league in sacks. That's not going away. They've actually added to that room. Their D-line, again, is deep. They have great linebackers. You added Judon. You have Uche, who's a great pass rushing linebacker. But then you talk about their secondary and adding Gonzo to that, as well as just their already good corners, and then their safeties, which they use like Swiss Army knives. I think people are infatuated with the idea of a New England regression, right? Because we hate the Patriots. Both of us, we could say, as AFC fans who had to watch the reign of Tom Brady, we don't like the Patriots. I don't as a fan. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're going to go 6-11. I'll joke about it, but I don't think they're actually going 6-11 or 5-12 or bottoming out. What I think they're going to be is either an 8-9 or 9-8 team that probably loses a lot of one-score games because they will play everyone tough. They are going to have a good offensive mind guiding Mac Jones. They're going to run these 2 tight end sets with a good slot tight end in Mike Gesicki to go with Hunter Henry in the red zone. Ramondre Stevenson's very good. I just don't think the Patriots as a roster offensively have enough to really knock you out unless your team is just playing exceptionally poorly and they capitalize, which Belichick is great at that. So when I look at the AFC East, to wrap it up, for me personally, I see a world where the Bills might enter as a wild card, but that is a lot of ifs in that statement to make that happen. I think right now, these teams, the Jets and Dolphins, Patriots, I'll include them, are reaching for the baseline that the Bills were already at. The Bills have added to their roster, they're deeper, and now they're higher up. So assuming full health, I think the Bills still take the division, but I do see it just being a bloodbath. And going to the AFC North, again, to everything you said before, Deshaun Watson's the X factor for a lot of that division's sanity and kind of the standings. Because if you are getting the Deshaun Watson that actually looked like a stud back in 2019, where he was just lighting it up, got them to the playoffs, Texans look good, your division's in trouble. It's in trouble because it's not just a slouching receiving core. I mean, I have it pulled up here. Whoever made this chart, by the way, put David Bell first before all their other receivers. So that was kind of funny. But apart from him, Amari Cooper, Marquise Goodwin, Elijah Moore, Peoples-Jones, and that rookie Tillman, who looked very good in the preseason.
Elijah Moore also they're moving him around. They're in the backfield. They're running jet motions with him. He's going to be their X factor.
Yeah. I really think they are a team that either falls flat on their face or surges to like the top of their division, and there's no in between. Now, the fantasy in me wants to hope that Watson falls flat on his face because I have Dorian Thompson-Robinson on my taxi squad in the Dynasty League. That would be the greatest flex of all time if he ended up starting and I could put him up. But there's a lot of talent on Cleveland. Their defensive draft was good. Their defensive line is very deep. Jim Schwartz is a very good defensive coordinator. My question marks are Stefanski and the either rise or fall of Deshaun Watson in that offense. Because he was, coming in mid-season last year, didn't look that great. Is he going to continue that trend or is he going to kind of fall flat? But then you look at the Steelers.
Can they marry the wide zone running with how I think they want to run a shotgun spread type offense with Watson? Because I think they want to get Watson to produce like a top 5 quarterback. Right. I mean, with the same case I made for Jackson, they want to get Watson to be, that so you can get as far as you can in the AFC. But can they marry it with Bill Callahan's wide zone under center stuff? And that's tough for some teams to find both offenses and run both effectively. And
your system worked last year with the runs that they were already pulling off with Nick Chubb. And now you have Jerome Ford backing him up, who I think is a very strong prospect. Ironically, Pierre Strong is the one after it. That was not intentional, I promise. But I don't know if the Browns succeed for taking away what made them such a tough out last year. Because even with Brissett, I still thought that they were a team that was tough to beat. We struggled against them up until the fourth quarter when we played them. Do you want to kind of change the way your offense forms and mitigate your best strength, or do you just try to play out of it? And that could be the Achilles heel for the team. For Pittsburgh, again, their draft was so good, dude. It was so good. Keanu Benton, Nick Herbig. We haven't even talked about Darnell Washington, who could be an absolute nightmare in matchups if he is as athletic as he looks. They have George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. They have a lot of talent. And when Jaylen Warren ends up being running back 1 this year, they're going to be really, really tough to beat. And if Pickett, it's preseason, man. I try not to put stock into it, but he looked poised. He looked confident. He looked like a quarterback that's ready to prove something, and people are sleeping on him. We've had a lot of discourse, debate about the AFC North winner. I don't know who the hell wins that division, to be honest with you, but I see the case for the Steelers. Ravens, you said it perfectly. You got rid of Greg Roman. You have Tom Monken there. Spread offense. Lamar has played in a pro-style offense before. He's said it himself. There's a lot of receiving talent there. Zay Flowers, I think, is going to be a great prospect and have a good year. Odell Beckham Jr., who people seem to forget about, still looks like Odell Beckham Jr. They have great tight ends. They have a really deep roster, but like the Dolphins and like the track record has shown, are the Ravens going to stay healthy? I don't know. So I can't put too much stock until I see them consistently healthy. And that includes you, Lamar Jackson. I adore Lamar Jackson. But if you get hurt and ruin my best ball draft, I'm going to be very upset with you. And then there's the Bengals. Well, and you know, what can be said? They did lose some pieces, and we'll go to that topic next. But you have Joe Burrow, who's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. There's the case for top 3. Not the case. He is a top 3 quarterback. He's poised. He's confident. He's as accurate as anybody. I think he's top 3. But when you talk about the receiving core, I mean, again, it's as deep as anybody. I mean, I know that they lost Hurst and now they added in Irv Smith. I saw your projections yesterday, Joe. You have him at like 330 yards or something like that. But listen, I mean, if he's healthy,
I don't expect him to play more than 12 games.
Right. And again, like track record shows he hasn't been healthy, but T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, freaking Jamar Chase, a tandem of running backs that make it work. Like they're just a team that plays tough to anybody they go up against. And again, Lou is going to have that defense running laps and you know, the tricky coverages that seem to stymie every quarterback they play, including Patrick Mahomes. They're a tough team, man. And just, I think like it's what have you done for me lately? Like I say with the Dolphins, Jets, Pats, and what I'll say for your division is every one of these teams has a case to be the top of their division, but the Bengals have proven it. And maybe there hasn't been a repeated winner, but that trend's got to end at some point, man. And I really think that this could be the year that the Bengals just repeat it and hold their dominance on that division. So, Joe, before we move on to our teams and kind of what they've gained and lost, any final thoughts on the topic of these divisions?
No, I think you nailed most of it. It's really going to come down to quarterback play and what version all of these teams you're going to get. Can Mac Jones take a step? Can Aaron Rodgers regain form? Can Tua stay healthy? Can Lamar in a passing offense take a step and get them into a more dynamic passing offense? Can Kenny Pickett take a step? Can Deshaun Watson return? And if you know, so there's so many ifs with all those quarterbacks. Flip coins, see how it falls, and hopefully Burrow and Allen are still Burrow and Allen, and our teams end up as the best in that division.
Whole lot of ifs is such a great like phrase. And that's really when you boil down the discussion, because again, for all the teams that gain people in the offseason, lose people in the offseason, you see the fans of these teams, and I'm not trying to call anybody out because NFL is variable. Anything could happen. Of course, your team could win the division. There could be a lot that leads up to it. But if player X and if player Y and if player Z do this, and then if this happens, then we're winning the division. Like you got to realize that the teams that were on top for a reason, unless there was a glaring drop in anything that happened with them. So like for the Bills, if Josh Allen got signed by a different team or something like that, that's worth noting. But again, your division winners, the losses, I don't think outweigh the gains or keeping them neutral. And is your team now at the line that they're at, and are they going to overtake it? Which I don't know. And Cover One's Chris Kepner, which by the way, guys, I have to promo it because I have him on the screen. Tonight at 8 p.m., Cover One watch party on playback.tv. You can download the app or go to the website. Chris will be hosting Josh Allen's first ever game at Wyoming. It's going to be a really interesting episode. If you want to go look at the humble beginnings of Mr. Josh Allen and you just want to, have a nice beer on a Saturday night, you're not going to the club or anything, then sit down with our guys and watch this because it's going to be a lot of fun. The Playback channel, Joe, is so much chiller. It's just a really great environment. It's like you're hanging out in the room with them watching it. So I implore you all to please check this out. And Chris, the Jets could very well be a time bomb, to get to your point. That's why I've had it on the screen. They could. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of variables that are either going to make this team incredibly successful or fall flat. But I would be lying if I said I didn't worry about their potential in this division. So I will say that. But Joe, let's move on to our specific teams now, because we have really seen some losses, some net gains for our team. I know the Bengals have gone through them. So I kind of want to hear your thoughts on what you think about the Bengals offseason, their acquisitions, losses. What's your outlook on their roster this year?
Yeah, so I think this is probably their peak chance to win it. And not only did I talk about earlier about returning most of the 53, but being a super young team, Once the contracts start to hit for some of these guys, these receivers, and once you got to worry about that stuff, and the offensive line's all paid right now. It's 5 veteran starters all making good money, except for a Cordell Wilson, a left guard. I shouldn't have said making good money. For 4 out of 5 are making good money. It's tough to keep that together for long, right? So the biggest losses in the offseason, how will they affect the overall outlook of the team? I don't think it's going to have a big factor, but there is one spot for sure we're watching and have an eye on, and that's at safety. We'll start there, where they lost Jesse Bates and Von Bell, 2 very good players. I mean, both former captains of this defense. Jesse Bates is the free safety with the range, Von Bell with the IQ, field general, strong safety type. Stay in the box, will hit you, could tackle really well. Both walk in free agency, go to the NFC South, Bell to the Panthers, Bates to the Falcons. How do you replace that, especially in a defense that is an amoeba? They can do whatever they need to do. A lot like the Patriots and Bill Belichick in their history. If the Bengals want to come out and be a 3-4 defense all game, they will. If they want to be a team that blitzes a lot one game, they will. If they want to be a man team, a zone team, whatever they have to do to win that matchup, they do. And they'll change it at halftime. They'll come out in the first 2 drives and they're like, yeah, this isn't working. Flip to a 4-3 defense and we'll run it from here. Go to nickel and stay in nickel for the rest of the game, and we'll hit the switch right now and do it. And they'll shut teams down in the second half just off that adjustment. And they are completely okay doing that. And a lot of that is because of the communication at safety. When you can show one thing pre-snap and switch to another thing post-snap, your safety's got to coordinate it. And whenever you hear analysis or you watch film, they are smoothly transitioning guys and pointing guys. I mean, I'm talking watching half speed and watching them switch from a single high look to a 2 deep or a 4 or cover 4 shell. And instantly everyone's communicating and talking like as the play's going on, and they switch completely. And now the quarterback's holding the ball. You watch the time to throw of quarterbacks versus Lou Anarumo, and they all go up a half a second when they play them, because they're like, I'm not sure of what I'm seeing. I have to hold this ball post snap for that much longer before I make my throw. And that can change the way quarterbacks play completely. So you lose your safeties and you say, man, that's going to be a huge hit to the veteran presence, the experience, the communication that is so crucial to the inner workings of this defense. It's a pillar of them. If you're going to replace those guys, do it with a first-round pick in Dax Hill, right? A guy that has speed and athleticism and ball skills, can play the deep free safety, can come into the box and cover in the slot, can be the guy that moves all around throughout this defense. And so far, he looks like he can do that through preseason and camp. He looks like they look at him like he's going to be our star. Like, this guy can do whatever we need him to do. Let's find other safeties that free up Dax Hill to do whatever we want. So then they signed Nick Scott from the Rams, who was a starter for about a year and a half for them. Another 4.37 guy to go with Dax Hill's 4.36 speed. So they're going to be fast on the back half. And Nick's got some starting experience. He looks like he's playing a lot of free while they move Dax around. And then when Dax goes to free safety, they will move around Nick Scott. But they have a 3 safety look because they spent a 3rd round pick on Jordan Battle out of Alabama, a guy they had a high 2nd round grade on. So if you haven't heard this, they were considering they had 1 first round grade left. So as it gets there, it's Miles Murphy. Let's take the pick. Let's keep it moving. Easy decision for them. As they're going in round 2, they're like, we'd really like DJ Turner, because we would have considered him in an emergency scenario in the 1st round. DJ Turner is still there, but they really got a really high grade on Jordan Battle too. So they're like, well, if Turner's not there, we'll take Battle. Turner's still there. They're happy to get DJ Turner in round 2. Round 3 comes around. They're like, Battle is still here. We like our safeties. We like Dax Hill. We like Nick Scott that we just signed. Last year's 5th round pick, Tyson Anderson out of Toledo, had a 3rd round grade for them. He had 2 interceptions this preseason. They were happy with Tyson Anderson being their 3rd safety. And then Battle's still there. They trade back and say, okay, if Battle is still there after we trade back 10 picks, we're just going to have to take him. They trade back 10 picks. He's still there. They take Jordan Battle. Couldn't be more than happy to get that extra pick. Ends up being a punter who they desperately needed as well. So now in 3 safety looks, it looks like Nick Scott and Jordan Battle are the deep guys, and they're letting Dax Hill come in and cover tight ends one-on-one in man coverage, something they did a lot last year with Trey Flowers. And he just strictly came in. I think 69% of his snaps were in man coverage. So when he came in, he was covering tight ends one-on-one. The Bengals are going to do that with Dax Hill, and he's got the length and the speed to do it. It'll be very interesting to see if you play DFS fantasy or with individual defensive players. I want Dax Hill this year. I think he could be a huge step. But are they going to miss something? They're probably going to miss some communication and some, okay, I see that for the first time. Now we can adjust type of thing. But they're going to add more versatility because Bates and Bell were strictly free safety, strong safeties, and they're going to add more speed, which I'll take either of those if that's the trade-off with high draft picks. Yeah. The other loss would be Hayden Hurst and Samaje Perine on the offensive side. You try to replace Irv Smith. It could be a 1-for-1 if Irv stays healthy. You might even get a little bit more out of it. Hayden Hurst never been a deep or a downfield threat. I do think Irv Smith looks better in that area, so maybe they'll be able to get more dynamic at that position. Samaje Perine is a big loss in terms of efficiency and just being a bull, going straight ahead, and pass protection. So they lose both of those things. They have a lot of inexperience behind Joe Mixon in terms of pass protection. The most is like Travion Williams, who's expected to step into that role with about 22 pass protection snaps in his career. We really don't know how that's going to go. Last year, Travion Williams had 2 catches. So, you're putting him into that third down role. We'll see. And then Chris Evans, hopefully he took a step in year 3 out of Michigan. And then they draft Chase Brown out of Illinois, who looks good and looks like he could do it, but he's a rookie and a 5th-round pick. You just never know when that guy, if he ever plays, or what the contributions will look like. And then on the offensive line, the biggest addition to this entire team is Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle. Jonah Williams, who has been the starting left tackle since being drafted, besides the times he's missed with injury, is the only guy remaining from that Super Bowl offensive line. Everybody else is not even on a roster, on an active roster anymore. Just 2 years later, 18 months later, really. Orlando Brown Jr. should bring stability, health, durability, at the very least, size at that spot. He and Cordell Volson are probably the largest left tackle, left guard combo in the entire NFL. Both guys are massive. It should at least give you something. Now, Orlando Brown's not great. I know he's made 4 Pro Bowls in a row now, but he does have some athletic limitations. He does at times, it's like 2.5 seconds, and all of a sudden he's just kind of like standing straight up and not letting the guy through because the play should be over. I'm not really sure if the consistency with him, why that happens, but he's an upgrade because Jonah Williams has given up about 22 sacks the last 2 years. While he's a good player, when he gets beat badly. And I don't think with Orlando Brown, you've got to worry about that. You're going to have to fight and claw through him, where Jonah Williams now kicks over to the right tackle spot and actually has looked good in preseason and in the summer and in camp. And they're like, whoa, we didn't know Jonah Williams was a power blocking right tackle for when they want to do their man gap schemes, and he's down blocking and they're pulling the left guard and, inserting the tight end on the other side. And he's moving those defensive tackles. So I think they're really excited about Jonah and having 5 starters, probably their best offensive line since about 2015, 2016, where they had a really good line.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you, because you were talking about your young secondary. First off, DJ Turner, that's a hell of a pickup, man. He was one of those prospects when I saw him, I was like, there's no way the Bills do this. They're not drafting him. We have a cornerback room, but man, I wouldn't be mad if they did in like the 3rd round or something. But I was pretty happy with their draft. Mm-hmm. But I think when you talk about younger players entering your secondary and how much it relies on communication, the growing pains, I don't want to, maybe inevitable just because they're youngsters playing in the NFL, it happens. But this is really going to show the brilliance of Lou, is how quickly are they getting acclimated to the defense and their responsibilities, and how creative can you get? Because for someone as adaptable as Lou, I just think that it won't be a very tough transition for your defense. I think given the first couple weeks and maybe kind of the Browns finding their footing offensively, and then you face the Ravens, who could be doing the same thing, that could be an opportunity for the young members of your secondary to kind of get their assignments right, and then eventually take heed to the point where that defense still plays as fluid as they ever did. And tailoring to in-game situations for the Bengals is awesome. So my question for you, when it comes to your running back room, is just, talk to me about like your outlook on Mixon this year versus the people behind him, because it seemed like it was an even split with him and Perine. With Perine gone, is this going to just help Mixon's role, or do you think it actually takes less snaps, less responsibility for some of these youngsters?
So I'm excited to see how this plays out. There's a little bit of unknown and uncertainty at that position anytime you lose your 3rd down back. And they've done that now. Last few years, they cut Giovanni Bernard the year before 2021 and said, okay, we're going to insert Samaje Perine, who actually didn't have a lot of snaps either as a pass protector. But they were like, he can do it. So we know he can do it. That's the same way they're speaking about Travion Williams now. is the way but they did, to be fair to P. Ryan, they did offer him the same contract he took with the Broncos. Apparently he asked, so what's going on with Mixon, and are you drafting a running back? And they said, we don't know what's going on with Mixon, and yes, we plan on drafting a running back. So he said, you know what, I'll just take the money in Denver. I have a more solidified and clear role there, despite you're offering the same amount of money. So that's why he took that, and that's why they were left the way they were. They wanted to draft, or were open to drafting a running back in the first, second, third round. Just it did not fall to them. They didn't plan to go defense. They were into, if Jahmyr Gibbs was there, if Zach Charbonnet was there, if a bunch of guys, the run ended up being weird, but they had a high grade. They were considering Chase Brown in the 4th round. They had a high grade on him. They were like, all right, we'll take him in the 4th round if he's still there. And then Charlie Jones, who they had a higher grade on, was there. So they were happy to see Chase Brown still there in round 5. So they like him a lot. And they think he can be a pass protector. He's in the Giovanni Bernard mold in terms of size. He had some of the most pass protection snaps in college football. So he can get there. He didn't look that great in preseason. So we'll have to see, how long that takes. It's usually year 2 for those guys in pass protection. So we may not see that right away. But the Bengals' biggest issue at running back is a entire issue with the offense, because there's such an explosive downfield offense with these passing options. Teams will sit in these cover 2 and shell looks and say, we are not letting Jamar Chase go 50 yards and gritty in our end zone. We're not letting T. Higgins dunk on our corner 40 yards downfield. We're not going to watch that all game. So we're just going to stay in these shells and say, and you guys have dealt with this, right? The Chiefs have dealt with it. The Bills have dealt with it.
Right.
We're just going to stay in these cover 2 shells, pick us apart all day. We want you to go 10, 12 plays on us because we think you'll have a mistake or a holding call, or you'll give up a sack, and then we'll get out of this drive with a field goal. And that's a win for defenses against these top offenses. So they're giving up, and the Bills did this. This was in the playoff game. The Bills said, we'll give Joe Mixon 5 yards per carry. We don't care. We want you guys to go 10 plays, and we're going to hold you to a field goal, or you'll make a mistake. Bengals didn't make the mistakes, and were able to capitalize on those drives and finish them and punch them in. So it didn't work for a lot of defenses, that the Bengals became a very highly efficient, the best against cover 2 for the second half of the year. It came to the point where, keep doing it, because the Bengals are going to put 30 points on you if you want to sit in cover 2. So I'm excited to see what defenses shift and what they do. But to get to the running game, if they're going to sit in those shells and allow Mixon to have 4.5 every time, that's great. But what it also does is both safeties are collapsing on him at that 5-yard mark, and he's not an elusive runner. He's going to run that guy over, maybe get an extra yard out of it and truck him and assert his physical dominance. But he's not going to make guys miss and rip one. And he's not a James Cook. James Cook will probably split those safeties and rip it, right? And it's like, you want to get out of that cover 2 shell, because this running back's ripping 40-yard runs on you. You better get out of it. And that's the only thing that's really going to scare defensive coordinators and get them out of that shell, so you can start attacking vertically again on the outside. So the Bengals don't have that unless Chase Brown offers that, because that's your speed.
Yes.
So if they can get Chase Brown in and let him run the ball more and threaten and get defenses out of that shell, then where does Mixon land? Is he just we can only run him because he can never pass protect before, but he's always had the safety net of a Samaje Perine and Giovanni Bernard, so we never had to worry about pass protection, never had to really, right, exactly. As soon as Daquan Jones was out that game, I remember an hour and a half before, I was like, they're going to run the ball up the middle. It's going to be a nightmare for them. And they did, of course. But if Mixon can actually pass protect, and I think the Bengals are going to test it a little bit more than they ever have before, I could see him getting more catches, less carries in this offense. And I think that could unlock this offense a little bit more, because I think Chase Brown adds that explosiveness in the run game more than Mixon does.
And Lord knows we don't need another explosive running back on a contending AFC team. But yeah, I'm glad Jessica brought that up too. That playoff game was just a really weird day for the Bills as a whole, as a collective. Because you were missing. Our pass rush was decimated. Your offensive line was decimated. So it really just came down to game plan. And yeah, like you said, they do this against the Chiefs too. They will let you run. They do not need to see Patrick Mahomes throw over the top and burn the safeties and get someone in the end zone. They will sit in that 2 high all day, and they will try to get you to make a mistake, or at the very least keep you out of the end zone, waste your time and kick a field goal. So if the Bengals do have this capable back that actually provides explosiveness, and Mixon is kind of hybrid, taking carries, but also kind of in pass pro or as a receiver, yeah, that opens things up for you tremendously. I want to ask you though, because I'm looking at your roster, and there is a prospect that I was a fan of. I know Kevin Messeri was a big fan of him. I thought he could have ended up on the Bills, but you guys poached him, and that's Yoshivas. And I've heard he's had a very good camp. I want to know your take on him and what you can expect out of him. And you can include Charlie Jones too, who I also was a decent fan of too.
Yeah, so they took Charlie Jones out of Purdue, formerly of Buffalo and then Iowa, and he's transferred around. In the 4th round, they took Andre Yosivas out of Princeton. In the 6th round, they had 2 6th-round picks, one on a punter and then one on another receiver, on a team that's loaded with the top 3, and they like Trenton Irwin as their 4th guy as well. So Trenton Irwin still is going to be the 4th receiver. He made a lot of plays for them when he got in the game. But so in camp, everyone's expecting Charlie Jones, and I think maybe the stigma got to people a little bit of, we got a Princeton receiver that's athletic and tall, but he needs work. And then we got this white receiver moving to the slot. He should be crafty and smart. It was completely the opposite. The feeling was, when I talked to people, was Yoshivas is way more prepared than they expected and ready to go. And Charlie Jones is less than they expected. And so there's a learning curve more with Charlie Jones because he doesn't have the experience. He bounced around so much and was never a huge part until this last year of an offense. He was a special teams return man. And I think he won the punt return job for the Bengals. So he's going to be active. So they need to get him up to speed. And then he had a shoulder injury in preseason. So he wasn't able to participate for a couple weeks there. But the first week of preseason, they put Charlie Jones on the boundary, could not get open, he just wasn't big enough, wasn't physical enough. They get him in the slot and he looks fine. So they're going to develop him to hopefully take over for Tyler Boyd in a year and be their slot receiver. But Andre Yoshivas, Yoshivas is the 6'3", 220-pounder that can stretch down the field. And man, he was every single day in practice. He's like, he beat DJ Turner down the field. He beats Cam Taylor-Britt down the field. He beat the backups down the field. And then in preseason, he had the most targets, most catches of any guy in preseason throughout the league. I think they gave him 29 targets overall in 3 games. They were just feeding him. They wanted to get him up to speed because they were first enamored with him and interested, but this guy needs reps as well. Some of that is still true. And the one thing I thought was interesting, Duke Tobin, their director of player personnel, pretty much their de facto GM, he goes on and he talks every day during their broadcasts of the preseason broadcast. And he said with Yoshivas, he goes, we need him to play like a big receiver. He sometimes waits for the ball to come to him. He doesn't attack it. He needs to get his hands out. He needs to play big. He's going to find that out in the NFL, that his size isn't going to be, that type of clear-cut advantage. He actually needs to attack, extend his arms. And you can see it even in preseason. There was a lot of targets that he probably should have come down with, but he's not attacking the ball. He's not latching onto it. He's not catching away from his body. Not comfortable. He has extremely small hands, 8 3/4 inch. That's, smaller than quarterback Joe Burrow and his 9-inch, smaller than my hands. And I'm not an NFL player. So you can see at times he goes up and he'll try to cradle it, or his hands are upside down. And he's fighting it and he wants to get it in between his forearm and his chest. But if you're a big receiver, we need you to go up and play that. Right. Caught 37% of contested balls in preseason. Very similar to the way T. Higgins came in the year too. Came in his career. Year 1, I think he was at 37% as well. Year 2 is 44. Last year, he's nearing 60% in contested situations. I think it takes receivers time to do that. Higgins has giant mitts, though. So, maybe he's more comfortable doing that. We'll have to see if Yoshi can take that next step. I don't know. I'm not ready to say. Some people have said, can he be Higgins? Can you let Higgins go and let Yoshi be the outside vertical threat? I'm not ready to say that because in November, Yoshi was an older prospect. He's going to be 24. Higgins is 24. We're talking about the developmental curve there. He needs to be good right now in order to do that.
Me as a 27-year-old hearing someone say that 24 is old makes me existentially dreadful. But Yoshivas, I looked up his measure. So 6'3", 212. He's a guy that was, outside kind of guy, really can win those if he tries. I think with a form change, I could absolutely see him being that type of receiver in your offense. Even if you do manage to retain somehow Chase and you manage to retain Higgins, I still think there's a perfectly fine role for him on this team. But what you brought up that I thought was interesting is when you said Charlie Jones might be the Boyd replacement, because when I watched Charlie Jones, I watched him. I didn't see it as a downfield threat when I watched him. It didn't look like he just ever had a chance on contested catches or he would get blanketed. But when he cut left or he cut right, that was when he shined. So I was like, why is this dude not playing slot for somebody? Like, I could absolutely see him taking that. And that could be the case in the Bengals offense. He just feels like that dependable receiver, like someone that will get open in the middle of the field, especially if teams are playing zone against the Bengals and there's just a huge soft spot for him to take. So yeah, I really want to see what the Bengals end up doing with their receiving core down the road, because when these contracts, when Burrow's extension kicks in and you got to pay Chase, what is it going to look like? And are they going to be in good shape? And Yoshi Voss is a prospect that I think could very well be that kind of player that really could inherit the role and be very serviceable or even very good for the Bengals. Before we move on to the final topic, just real quick, because, I'll talk about the Bills' biggest losses and biggest additions. Tremaine Edmonds, I would say, is probably your number one loss. I mean, the thing about him was you could talk about his processing and defense and how he always kind of came up a little slow, but you saw kind of this rise in his ability once the defensive line kind of got situated, because when they were hitting home in these 4-man rushes with Von Miller, Edmonds was cleaning up the mess. He didn't have to, it sounds silly, but it almost looked like he didn't have to overthink it. It was just get up there, the play is getting disrupted, there's pressure on the quarterback, be in your spot, you're good to go. And his size was amazing at middle linebacker, because the middle of the field was essentially a giant fence with a very large human in front of it who was there to keep you from throwing over the middle. Him being gone raises concerns about how that Mike position is going to look this year. And for Bills fans, when I did an episode a few weeks ago, I had said like, oh, I think it's going to be Dotson to kind of kick in and like be the veteran. And he's did it. He didn't look good at all. Like, he's had a couple of plays where you could be like, nice job. But for the most part, he didn't look good. And what the issue I have is while Bernard, I'm not sleeping on to say he couldn't be a good linebacker, we don't know what he's going to look like. And this team has relied on it to a point where I'm wondering if Sean McDermott and his inheriting of the play calling changes the amount of responsibility or the amount of dependence on Mike in this defense. If it's the same as it was last season, I'm worried, definitely worried, because I just feel like teams are going to pick that apart, especially these timing, really rhythmic offenses with good receivers like Miami, Cincinnati, even Kansas City, even the Jets. Like, that could be a glaring flaw in a team that really wants to keep that middle of the field tight and force you to look outside if they drop two. But that's kind of the biggest one, because apart from that, it seems like the Bills have had more net gains than losses. The biggest problem offensively last year, apart from rookie play caller Josh Allen overdependence, was the interior O-line. And I think they've shored that up very well with McGovern, adding in David Edwards, adding in Osiris Torrance, rookie who looks very good right now. And then behind him, you're going to have Bates to be the serviceman. I think that could really work wonders for an offense, especially one that's lining up in 12 personnel way more this year. Fully expect it. A team that's going to run out of it a lot more and get a lot more downfield push, which they missed last year. And it seemed that they could only run against light boxes. And when the box was stacked, they just completely shied away from it. And they didn't have that ability. So I think they can this year, especially with some of the additions like Harris and Murray. But again, I said this on Thomas's show on Thursday. Final point on the additions before we move on to the final topic. It's the yards after catch this year that I think is going to be the absolute game changer for this offense. And my prediction has been that they're going to be the most efficient offense in the league this year, because I think you are taking the role of Superman from Josh Allen, where you are not saying don't make the play when you have to, but you don't have to as often. We have the personnel now that you can throw a 5 to 10 yard pass and they can move after it. Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, Dalton Kincaid, all receivers and tight ends that are very good at it. This offense, in my opinion, James Cook, yes, which we didn't see enough of last year. You're 100% right. They have this ability now to get the ball in the hands of playmakers and let the playmakers go. And if teams are doing what they do to the Bengals, which is now you drop too high because you're worried about Josh Allen burning you with Stephon Diggs, that just plays into the hand of this even more. And that makes me even more confident in it. So I really think this year, this is going to be an offense that's reminiscent of 2020, where we see them, again, feed their playmakers, let Josh avoid making mistakes, only throw the deep shot when you have to, don't lean on it too much, because then it just opens everything up. And that's why I think they'll be efficient. So more gains than losses. I haven't really talked much about the defense, but Leonard Floyd, third year Greg Rousseau, Von Miller when he comes off pup, a lot to be excited about. And I think if McDermott truly is a more aggressive play caller, I think this defense is going to have a lot of success this year. We'll see. But final thoughts today. So I just want to ask you, since it is an outlook of the AFC, to kind of bring it to the bigger picture, Joe. What is your early prediction for how the seeding and how this falls out? We've talked about it once before on this show, but just kind of in your eyes, given the way the rosters are constructed right now, how do you see the AFC shaking out this year?
I never like to say the 4 division winners are going to run it back because that never happens. And so who's going to falter? Where's it going to be? And it's, even though the Bills and Bengals are probably Bills, Bengals, Chiefs, clearly top 3. The competition we talked about in the divisions, can the Chargers overtake the Chiefs? It would probably take some injury or some unforeseen thing. Can the Titans rebound and get it together? I'm not very high on them. I don't think they can touch what I expect to be another step for the Jags. So does that mean the Bengals or the Bills are the ones that falter and slide down from being division winners? And does that mean the Dolphins overtake, or the Jets overtake, or the Ravens overtake, or the Browns overtake, or is it one of the surprise teams? Either way, I do think those 4 teams that won their divisions last year make the playoffs again, even if it ends up being as a wild card spot. I think the floor for the Bengals is probably 10 wins. They should get to that. I think clearly in about 9 to 12 games, they've got a quarterback advantage. And then there's the handful of games where it's going to be a shootout. It's the Josh Allens and the Patrick Mahomes, and let's see how it falls, So I think the ceiling could be 13 wins, 14 maybe. That I don't want to get too crazy. I never want to get too high in there, but it may require that. You'd have to go on. They won 10 games in a row. Actually, all these teams, Bengals and Bills, were on winning streaks until they met, remember, in that playoff game. And so these teams got to do it again. Every time you think there is strong competition in the AFC, or these other teams got these quarterbacks, these other teams got this and that, somehow our 2 teams have found a way to rise above them and still get it together and go on these win streaks and look superior, look more efficient, just look more dynamic in a lot of ways. And I agree with your assessment on the Bills, in terms of getting the yak and having that take their offense to another level. I'm completely with it. And I think that's way more offsetting than missing a linebacker that took up more space. Maybe you get Taylor Rapp in there. Maybe you get a safety, coming down and playing more 3 safety looks, being more dynamic on defense. I think the biggest issue for them last year was they didn't want to come out of their shell on defense and wouldn't do enough to change the game plan. That's great in the regular season. They've had top 3 defenses for how long? But then you get into the postseason, it's like they're chewing you up if they got a good quarterback or a good offensive scheme. I think now they've got a chance to be different or break that mold. So the Bills should be better. They should be back in where they were in the expectations of having an MVP quarterback and having the number 1 seed and the odds to win the Super Bowl again. But I feel the same way about the Bengals. I just think it's unforeseen things are going to be what decides this. Does somebody get hurt? Is the coach not right for the system? Is whatever happens. And so it's hard to predict. Other than saying, I think we know who the good teams are. We don't know who those next group of teams, who's going to come out of it and who's going to make the most noise out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For Bill's record prediction, I said my floor is about 10. My ceiling's about, let's call it 13. It's going to be tough to get to 13 now. Mm-hmm. With as good as I think they're going to be, I still think they win the division, but I think a division winner of 11, 12 wins is the more realistic option. It's a very competitive AFC East now. Even if I think the Bills are the baseline team, and I think they're the team that's won this, I do worry about how they're going to play against their contemporaries, because they have geared up significantly. And I don't know, while I am confident in what Sean McDermott's going to bring, I don't know what it'll look like even with wrinkles. Now, he watched a defensive coordinator twice last season, albeit one of those matchups was unfortunately premature, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, I am so happy Damar Hamlin's back. I love that addition, just having him as depth in the safety room. It's amazing to see what he went through, or to see how he overcame what he went through, But I think when you see Sean McDermott and you know about his tendencies in Carolina, and you know about how pressure-minded he is and how he tries to get you to make a mistake, I don't see a world where that doesn't happen, but I wonder to the extent of how aggressive he'll be and if he can time it correctly. And that will be a huge difference maker into the record prediction for me, because if he does see kind of like what Lou does and tailors his defense to just change things up when they need to change things up, and whether that's dropping more safeties, whether that's bringing more pressure when need be, I think you could see this defense replicate a top 5 outlook, but also do that in the playoffs. That's what I need to see. And they've had good playoff performances in the past. It's not like every playoff game they've been has been dreadful. The teams they've lost to are generally very good offenses, like Patrick Mahomes twice, like Joe Burrow. And then, I mean, the Houston game's kind of an anomaly. The Jags game, they only put up 10 points. So I do believe that this defense could be very good. I just think those question marks are what kind of separates to me the difference between winning 11 games to winning 13 games. Because if we have a McDermott defense that is absolutely dominant, showing out, these guys are in the right spots, Bernard has a positive sign, that'll work wonders. But again, that's a lot of ifs. Offensively, I'm not worried. And I actually want to pull up a comment here because Charles brought this up about the yak thing. So I want to say this. For me, that doesn't mean Josh isn't going to throw deep. You're not going to have Josh not throw deep. That's still going to happen. I just think the way to open that up and not over rely on it changes this year, because they became very dependent on explosiveness. That did have to do with Josh's elbow, but I think they are really trying to fine tune and construct how the middle of the field operates in this offense. And I think that's what's going to happen this year. But ultimately, that's my ceiling and floor for the Bills. I still have them winning the division. And as far as seeding, could be 1, could be 4, could be 6. It's really early to tell, but I would say with confidence that they'll be in the top 3. That's where I'm going to say they'll end up, just for my prediction. So, Joe, any final thoughts today?
Just that the Bengals have played a lot of playoff games on the road with this, the last 2 years. And so even if they don't end up as a top 4 seed division winner, I still feel good. If they get a wild card spot and they got to go to Buffalo, or they got to go to Baltimore, or they got to go to Tennessee or Jacksonville, or KC again. Can we get KC to not have a home play? Can Patrick Mahomes play an away playoff game, please? It'd be nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm very tired of going to Arrowhead, which we have to do again this year. I believe I forgot which week that is, but we're going. Yeah. And what is with the NFL scheduling putting you guys out there against Kansas City at the end of the year every freaking year? Or at least towards the end of the year. I get it's primetime, but
fair, they played in Cincinnati the last 2 times in the regular season, week 17 and week 15. So to be fair, in the regular season, this is the first time the Bengals are going out to KC.
Yeah, well, that'll be fun to watch. But Joe, before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts on anything we've discussed today? Anything you want to bring up or anything you would like to plug for the chat before we take it?
No, if you're interested, Bengals on the Brain on YouTube and on Twitter at Joe Goodberry, just the way it sounds. I do focus on Bengals, but as Joe said here, I am as equal football fan as anything. And I live in Western New York, so I talk about the Bills a lot. A lot of my friends and family are huge Bills fans. I end up watching pretty much everything on the Bills. I watch Cover One and all their stuff because I'm interested, and they break down so much of it so well that I emulate a lot of my stuff after them as well. So you will find something interesting, I assume, even if it's just keeping tabs on a conference rival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Joe, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I always love hearing your insight. You are just fantastic to talk to. I feel like I learn so much when I get to bring you on. But for all of you in the chat today, thank you all so much for your contributions, for talking to us, for getting yourselves in the discussion. It means the world to have you following along. Obviously, it's been a very long off season with a lot of drama for some reason. And we are at the end of it, and football is finally back. And I am so, so, so happy and so excited to just be able to do this show for you this year. Next week, we will be talking about a preview against the Jets, and I'm joined by Mr. Aaron Quinn himself for the first time ever on Under Review, which I am super, super excited about. But if you can, on your way out, if you like the show today, please throw a like on the video, share it with your friends. It would mean the absolute world to me and all of the gentlemen at Cover One who are putting out this content for you on a daily basis. Again, in the description below, subscribe to the premium pass, $60 a year. It gives you access to so much insight and a really, really cool t-shirt. I can't stress it enough. That's just a super sick t-shirt. But once again, Joe Goodberry, thank you so much, guys. If you can, please drop him a follow. For me, my name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa. I will see you all next week. But even though I have a Bengals fan on the show, you know I got to drop it before I go. Go Bills. Have a great Saturday, everybody. And also, RIP